Hi everyone and welcome to Property Insight. In today's video we're going to be looking at what's better to invest in, stocks or property. It's an age-old debate. We're going to look at some media coverage which has really annoyed the hell out of me and see what it really means. My name's Neil Harding.
And my name's Mark Ashworth.
Stocks versus property. It seems like it's a never-ending debate, especially in a country full of people that are obsessed with investing and investing in property in particular. And I have seen an article, it was written a year ago, but I've only just come across it, and I read it and I had to roll my eyes into the back of my head because it was another article where I just thought, oh, you've missed the point though. You've missed the whole point of investing in property, and glossed over it and then said, therefore, stocks are better. And I just thought, oh, God's sake.
Okay, so stocks. So just so that so as a property channel, I get property, easy peasy, buy property, rent property out, have a mortgage on it, leverage it, all that stuff. We talk about this stuff all the time on this channel. Just describe to me, 30 seconds, stocks. What is it? What do you mean by it? And, just define what that actually means.
Good question, good point. Stocks and shares. You are becoming an owner of shares in a company. If you're investing in stocks, typically that's what you're going to be doing. And you can do it on a platform such as AJ Bell or Vanguard, or not to mention several others. Lots of platforms are available. You become a business owner. You own a percentage, even if it's a very small percentage, of a publicly listed company that anyone can own.
And that's the same if you invest in what's described as a managed fund. You're essentially, is that the same thing or is that slightly different?
Well, it could well be the same thing in that you are then, if it's a managed fund, someone's managing a fund on your behalf, you're handing over your money to them for them to manage. It's still your money. And they will make the decisions on potentially exactly which companies to invest in. And that will be done within your guidance. And that guidance could range from, I want high risk returns, I don't really care where in the world the money's invested or where those companies are operating or what sectors they're operating in, all the way down to, I want steady, reliable, lower risk returns. I'm only really interested in, let's say, Europe and the US, whatever it may be. So, but ultimately someone's doing the day-to-day management of deciding what stocks you're invested in at any one time.
Okay, so we understand inflation, and hopefully you as viewers, we've talked about inflation before. Over a period of time, the value of things go up. I'm assuming that the value of stocks and shares goes up with inflation as well. So therefore, to a certain extent, they are protected against inflation from that perspective. But also, if you invest in the right companies and the right stocks and shares, you are considering that as that company improves its productivity and its profitability and its turnover, all those kind of things, the value of those shares go up, because more and more people are interested in them, or the company is better, and so therefore it gives you a better return. That's basically what you're expecting. Much the same as the property market, I guess.
Yeah. So the value of stocks and shares can go up and down. That's exactly the asset, just like the value of property can go up and down. And the income stream from owning the asset of stocks and shares might be a dividend paid by the company to its shareholders. In the same way, if you own the asset of a property, the income stream might well be rental profit that's paid to you by the tenant.
Although it isn't necessarily might well be, it is, isn't it? Otherwise, it's not an investment.
Yeah.
If it's just a property that you've bought that's just sitting there empty, then arguably it's going to cost you money, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
it's right. A liability.
I mean, I don't buy land, for example, and then just sit on it for years. I know some people might do that, but it's not what I do. But yeah.
Okay. So what's your beef?
What's your beef? I read an article. We're going to give the link to the article in the show notes so people can read the whole article if they want to. It's from Schroders, written in 23. And I'm going to read an extract from it. which was really the catalyst for me wanting to do this video. So bear with me while I just take 1 minute to read this paragraph. A further shadow is the faith that many Brits put in property as their pension. Anyone who has read the money section of a Sunday newspaper will be familiar with the question regularly posed to celebrity interviewees, which is better, property or pension? Now, I'm just going to insert stocks and shares for pension here because that's what they mean. In all but a few tiny minority of cases, the answer comes back property. House prices have tended to rise over time, so it is not hard to understand why people say this. £100,000 worth of UK property 25 years ago would be worth an average of around £454,000 today. This obviously varies by region. In London, it would be worth around £580,000 and in Scotland, £407,000. These figures exclude any costs of ownership such as maintenance, repairs, insurance or taxes, any income generated by the property, not relevant for primary residence, only buy to let, and the impact of leverage/mortgage finance. However, that same £100,000 invested in the global stock market, again excluding any costs, would have grown even more to around £631,000. This is almost 10% more than in even the best performing regional property market, London. Furthermore, it doesn't matter whether you look at this over 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 or 30-year horizons, the stock market would always have resulted in a bigger increase in your £100,000 compared with UK residential property. This also does not take into any account the substantial tax savings which can be earned by saving into a pension, nor the substantial taxes and costs associated with buying and selling property. So the next time you think about which is better, property or pension, think carefully before you answer. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I know one thing they have left out there, Neil.
Yeah.
It's the big L word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are assuming that you've got 100k that you've invested in the property and 100k you might have put into the stock market.
Yeah.
Out of your own back pocket without using a mortgage. The big L, by the way, was leverage, just in case you needed reminding. So leverage meaning that you could have actually only put £25,000 into that property, but yet that same £100,000 property would still be worth £450,000 today, even if you've only put £25,000 in it. Was that your beef, Neil?
That was my beef. That was my beef. It's like it's bizarre to me that you could write an article like this and completely leave out the biggest point of what is really the biggest weapon, I think, in the property investor's arsenal, which is leverage, the ability to borrow finance against the value of an asset, which is so powerful. And so I wanted to go through a little bit of illustration and numbers on why that is so powerful. We've done a separate video completely separate to this, just purely about leverage. So do check that out if you want to look at more about that. But this was really just to focus on the media approach to discussing stocks versus property investing. And there's a few things in here that I want to pull out. Like, for example, the phrase, this is almost 10% more than in even the best performing regional property market. And just that phrase alone, I think just leaves the reader with the sort of impression that 10% number is, oh yeah, no, I'm going to be so much better off. And actually, it's the other way around. Like they've excluded leverage and made that sound like a bad thing by the way they've phrased it, which I found quite strange as well. It excludes the impact of leverage and mortgage finance. Almost makes it sound like it's a bad thing. Oh, it's cost, so they haven't even included the cost of that. Actually, that's a powerful thing you should include it.
And sorry to interrupt you, Neil, but have they not also left out rental income?
Yeah.
Okay, so they've basically told you what the property might be worth in the future and the difference between what you've invested and what it might be in 20, 30, 35 years. But they failed to actually say that it gives you a regular monthly income. And actually, even if you hadn't had any leverage, then you could have actually factored in the total amount of income because you wouldn't have been paying a mortgage. But yet they haven't factored that into that
That's true.
calculation.
That's true. However, I didn't have as much of a beef with that point because also they didn't particularly make a big deal out of the dividend income stream that you might get from stock. So I felt like they were comparing apples with apples there. So on the one hand, they weren't saying you'd get rental profit but also they weren't saying, and you'd get dividend income. But yeah, you're right. So I went back to the numbers and got a spreadsheet out and tried to figure out what the growth rate was in house prices in the UK that they actually were saying have taken place in that period of time, over the 25-year period of time that they refer to, because they say that £100,000 house would be worth £454,000 today. So 25 years later. So actually, according to Schroders in that article, what they're saying is annual house price growth in the UK in the last 25 years, it's now 2024, was 6.5%.
Per annum?
Per annum. Not bad, right? I mean, it's a pretty decent rate of return. And also, what's really interesting is they chose the last 25 years, which includes the biggest crash the UK housing market has seen in the last, 100 years or more in 2008, which was circa, was it 15% or something? It was huge. So even with that, and 2009 didn't look that great either, it's still 6.5% growth per annum. But anyway, that's by the by to some extent. I looked at the annual global stock market growth implicit in the article, because they don't actually quote what that is either. They just say you'd be 10% better off, right? And that's 7.65%. As far as I could work out from the spreadsheet workings that I did. So 7.65% versus 6.50 for house prices. I mean, it's not such a compelling difference that you'd think, oh my God, I've got to invest in this global stock market, not property. But it definitely leaves you with that impression when you read it.
And the other thing also to mention here is that we're talking about pensions and property. So number one, pensions, fine. You put your investment in, so you're transferring your earned income into a pension. Yeah, you get a bit of tax relief on it, fine. But actually you don't realise that income until your pensionable age, which currently in the UK is for men.
True.
Well, I don't know what age it is.
57 if it's a private fund, and I think it might be, is it 65?
And it's
the state pension?
Slightly different for women, isn't it? I think the age is slightly different. But nevertheless, you won't see that return, let's say, until you start claiming your pension. So you have to survive until that long, number one. And then obviously you're not able to choose to take it any earlier. Property, however, pays you from day one. If you're taking rental income, as mentioned earlier, then you're going to be getting paid whether or not you've got a mortgage on it or not. But in the scenario where they're saying you put all of your money into it anyway, at least you could be in these days, or let's say if you bought a property even 10 years ago, your £600-700 a month now would be in excess of £1,000, I would guess, based on the rental income over the period. And you also then benefit of the capital growth of the property, but you can also realise the money now, or when you're pensionable age, you can realise it from day one.
Yeah.
The only thing we don't talk about, and they don't talk about necessarily, is that there is probably an element of work attached to the property in terms of it needs to be maintained and it needs to be managed and it needs to be looked after, and there are other compliance issues you need to deal with and all that kind of stuff. But I think what your argument is to say is one better than the other. It's looking on the face of things here that property probably does trump pensions for various reasons.
In my opinion, yes, and because of leverage. So again, going to get a bit geeky and nerdy, and bear with me while I just throw out some numbers. But again, I got the spreadsheet out and ran some numbers, and I think it's good just to look at them because it illustrates the point. So let's look at investing £100,000 in stock, and then let's look at investing £100,000 in property with leverage and see where you end up after a few years, okay? So I've assumed that you invest £100,000 in stock and you get 10% annual growth, not the 7.65% that I had calculated over the last 25 years. The reason why I've taken 10% is because I found another media reference that says that the S&P 500 has gained about 10% annually since its introduction in 1957. So I said, good, right, fine, let's go with 10% then and see where we end up. So let's assume you've invested £100,000 and after 1 year at 10% return, it's worth £110,000, okay? That £110,000 is invested again, it starts to compound. So after 2 years, the 110 has turned into 121. And after 3 years, it's turned into 121 has turned into 133, okay? So after 3 years, you've made £33,000, okay? Or a 33% return, not an annualized number, but 33% after 3 years.
And just to clarify, that number, that 33,000, isn't realisable until you start to claim your pension.
If it was a
you put
contribution
this
to
in
a pension, yes, correct, exactly. Let's look at investing £100,000 in property with debt finance or mortgage borrowing using leverage and see where we end up after 3 years in this scenario. I think you know where I'm headed with this.
Okay.
So
you sound very smug. So I'm guessing you do.
So with a 75% loan to value, the property market value would be £400,000 if you put £100,000 deposit in on a 75% loan to value mortgage, okay? And then let's see how the investment grows with compounding and the power of leverage at a growth rate of 4%.
Interesting.
Not very much, actually. Not very much when you consider that in the Schroders article, in the last 25 years, the numbers that they were referencing, which they didn't quote, but I had to calculate, was 6.5% annual growth, right? So I've only gone for 4%. So it's quite conservative. So at 4% after 1 year, the property has increased in value from 400k to 416. In year 2, the £416,000 at 4% growth has turned into 432, and in year 3, the 432,000 has turned into 450. So you've made £50,000 in 3 years. Okay, so that is a 50% return on your £100,000 that you've put into the investment across the 3 year period. Again, the 50% is not an annualized number, it's just total return. After 3 years, you've made 50% on your cash. So £50,000 compared with, what did I say for the 10% growth? £33,000. So quite a difference. Especially when you consider that's quite a conservative 4% number, not the 6.5%.
A little bit higher than that, wouldn't you?
And as you said earlier, I've not included anything to do with rental profit. So you get rental profit on that on top as well, which I personally think is probably more of a return than dividend, because I suspect that they weren't actually talking about dividend yield when they were talking about these returns on stocks, but I don't know for certain. So when you take that into account, I just think the returns on property, and this is why I became a property investor years ago when I decided what I wanted to do with my money. This is fundamentally the reason why I became a property investor. And time again, mainstream media that I see misses the point and doesn't spell this out to people, and it winds me up.
That's the reason why those articles exist, is because they think they have an argument and they generally won't and don't use leverage. Because the thing is, you can't leverage on pension contributions and you can't leverage when you invest in stocks and shares. There's no real way of doing that. So if there's no way to do it, they have to have a like-for-like comparison. The only way they can like-for-like comparison is by saying you invest £100,000 in property and you invest £100,000 in stock, and they basically get the result which they get, which is, saying that there's either not a lot in it or it's better to go with the stocks option. So I think the point that a lot of people miss is the fact that you will gain a lot more by leveraging, by mortgaging.
Exactly. So I will now get off my high horse and calm down and go and get another cup of tea. So we really hope that you found that insightful, and please do comment, like and subscribe to the channel. You can also find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook community group called Property Insight UK. Please do come and find us on Facebook and join the group. And we also meet up once a month, and all the details for that you'll be able to find on the Facebook group as well. Look forward to seeing you next time.